All right, guys, welcome back to the channel. This is the first ever Ohanacast, and I am here with Team Ohana team members Corey and Matt, and we're going to go around and introduce ourselves. You guys met me in the very first video on the channel and the last one, but we really focused on Tommy, and I didn't really introduce myself. My name is Bruce. I am the founder of Team Ohana, and I've been playing TCGs competitively for it'll be a decade this year. I come from Yu-Gi-Oh, where I have several premier event tops, and I just have a lot of experience in that realm. And when Lorcana came out, it was like the perfect time to jump into a new game, and I've been really excited and enjoyed it a lot since my uh, transfer to the game.
Yes, I can go second. I'm Corey. I also came from Yu-Gi-Oh. Didn't have a, I wouldn't say I had a ton of success. I got invited to like every WCQ season that I played in, but no like crazy YCS day twos or anything cool like that. But uh, I basically gave that up as soon as they announced competitive for Lorcana because the prize structure for Lorcana just seems significantly more worthwhile, and the card game is very enjoyable. So
My name's Matthew. I grew up loving TCG. This is my first competitive one. I just got back into cards when Lorcana came out. It just happened to be the perfect time. I think I'm the only one that has a sports cards background, so I love all cards.
Alrighty, so what we are going to do is for the very first segment of the Ohanacast, we have several audience segments which you should participate in the Discord, which will be linked down below in the description. That we're going to do this bi-weekly, hopefully, and we'll have several different questions and segments that you can be a part of. This very first one is going to be the question of the week, which was, what do you think is currently the best overall color in Lorcana and why? We had several different responses. And this first one comes from Ketrical. It says, my initial gut reaction was Emerald, as I am sure is the case with a lot of other people, but that is just because of a single deck that works really well. When it comes down to it, I think Steel with Ruby being insanely close for second is the best color in the game. It provides good removal, card draw, and some of the best playable characters in the game. Even looking at the best, in quotes, deck, Emerald Steel, all of your utility cards are Emerald, and your power outside of Diablo, who is a problem, are Steel cards. Um, I can I can ride a lot with that. The more powerful cards in your deck tend to be kind of the Steel ones that can let you interact with your opponent, keep your hand full. Other than until this set, other than like really Bucky and I guess Prince John a little bit last set, Steel hasn't really had, or not Steel, Green or Emerald hasn't really had a ton of like really powerful cards. I would say that like Ursula and Diablo are kind of the big standouts, especially coming into this set. What do you guys think?
I kind of agree with that take. I think Green prior to this set was kind of a meme because like there was a Green still last set, but it just like didn't really do anything. And then Emerald Steel was, or Ember Steel was so powerful that like even if you brought Emeralds or Emerald Steel, you would just like get annihilated by all the Amber in the room usually. I think this is probably its first time to flourish as a color, but I don't think it's the strongest. Uh, Still was like my initial choice, but I just think I have a hard time going with anything besides Amethyst.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Green was just more of a aggro color, and then the green steel last set like was more Prince John deck than a Bucky deck, which I feel like is not the best way to do it. The Bucky was always the better, and then it got the support it needed with Diablo and Aladdin. So that and then the Diablo was the first like green card you'd want to play that isn't just like an aggro card.
Right.
So
It's
then
the
that's
first. It's like
that.
the.
And
It's
I
also like the
agree.
first chase green.
Yeah, and then I agree with his original statement saying that like steel and red are like the two best colors because they're the two removal colors, so you always want to have one of those. But
Yeah, and last set especially with Green, like now you get to take advantage of like a Bucky discard as soon as he comes out on turn two. Last set you weren't seeing a Bucky discard until like turn four most of the time, unless you shifted like a Robin Hood on three. It would be like a Jafar or something, and that was just like much slower. That deck last set just folded to like a big tank, like ramp into big tank one
Yeah.
time. But now it has like so much more utility and card draw and like removal on its own that it has far less issues just folding to one like interaction. All right. Next one comes for DJ Big Russ. He's also a streamer. Check him out on Twitch. It says it's tough to actually say. Last set I would have said Steel, but outside of Fortisphere, the new 3/3 Aladdin and maybe the new Ariel. The color didn't get too much this set. Granted, Steel didn't need much. I do agree that the combination of card draw, great Floodborn characters, and removal is tough to beat. I do think Ruby is a close second. It got a big boost with Flynn and Brawl, Be King Undisputed, all the Sisus, just having access to all the best hard removal is always so powerful. Plus Maui, who is great at dealing with both locations and characters. Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Russ said. Again, like Steel and Ruby are again, they just have all the best removal. And I can echo a lot of the same sentiments that he said about around Ruby. Like Flynn is such a powerful card this set, Brawl is such a powerful card. Ruby just got a lot of like early power cards that like the red purple deck didn't seem to have before in the last couple of sets, right? Like you were playing a lot of essentially vanillas the first couple like turns until you got into your like power cards. But now Ruby's got like early game powerful cards such as Brawl and Flynn and things of that nature. B King is a really big one too this set, especially being singable, coming down on 4 instead of like 6 where Tremaine does is really huge.
Yeah, I agree. I also think like we kind of it was kind of like foreseen that they would get more early removal with Teeth and Ambitions last set. Because that's why they were playing like the 1/3s was to get that 2 damage. I think this is probably, if we're like going like, it's probably like recency bias a little bit, but this would be like my also close second, just because if you compare it with the amethyst cards, being able to sing like Be King with your bunny after drawing like is just seems like an insane combo. So
Absolutely.
I definitely agree with those things, and I feel like that Steel and Ruby also got cards like Avalanche and Find Them on Platinum, and then even the red items like Proclamation and the Spear that you tap to give something Russian Challenger that haven't even really been looked at that could definitely be meta cards. So they got a lot, and they've always had the best removal.
Absolutely. Throughout like the whole game, they've had the best removal pretty much. All right, and then this next one, and the last one for our Q&A segment, it comes from Michael R. He says, "I stand by purple. I've been saying it since Fox and Snake have come out. Between those two, Goat, all the card draw it allows, and most recently the Castle, I had a strong feeling Dolores and Isabella Madrigal will be making strong cases as overpowered cards. I made a monocolored pulper deck, and I have a strong feeling I could have it compete against a lot of strong meta decks." Um, I think that like especially like was what he mentioned, like the mims have been insane since the beginning of the game, since their inception. We'll talk about that when we get to the cast shift erase segment of the pod. But purple has been insane since set one, right? Like it was the best color in set one, simply because like replacing itself early on into the game was very important, and that was one of the few colors where most of your cards, as soon as you played them, gave you a card to replace itself, which was huge. And purple's always done really good at that.
yeah, and I think it's just gotten more powerful too as the game's kind of progressed. Because like set one, you like most people were countering red purple with like green purple just because red purple started off super slow, and then once they got to like 7, it was kind of like when they controlled the game, much like Sapphire Ruby is now. And with the addition of the Mim Merlin package in set 2, like it felt like it was an unbeatable deck in set 2. I think that's when most people like really like grew into it. So I think it's finally starting to fall off this set, but the constant draw power, the constant lore gain power, having the locations that draw you with characters there, it's just a lot to deal with, especially when most decks like thrived on like their early game against it before this.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people look at purple as a complementary color, as it has something that can draw it to replace itself like every turn, 1 through 5. And then the bounce package is obviously crazy. And like Corey said, exactly what they needed to not get into this top deck broom battle that it was doing in set 1. And then when they got the castle was the best location. So that's obviously helping. But I always think purple are more the primary color, and then the steel or red being the secondary color, because you're going to play like 40 purple cards and 20 of the other ones.
Yeah.
So that's why I always go purple as the best color.
And like Castle's arguably like the best card in the game right now. Like it last set was really good, but the way the meta has shifted this one, it's just much more of a problem to deal with. It's just really difficult and offers like so much advantage, quickly snowballs. It can like one castle can be threatening, two can end the game.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of the decks have forgotten about having to deal with locations, so Castle's gotten better.
Yeah, I also think there's still a lot of room for purple to continue to get good. Like the comment said, talking about Isabella, like using Isabella as like your main quester, questing for like 4 every turn, and like looping like Snake and Fox with like the 2-drop Pinocchio that taps a character, or Elsa's that come in and tap a character, like the one coming out in set 5 that we already saw. I think there's just so much potential for like removal and control that it's just going to be a dominant color in every meta.
Yeah, I've always loved how purple gains lore without questing.
Absolutely. Passive floor gain is incredible in this game. All right, so our next segment is going to be what is considered the game show of the Ohanacast. This segment is inspired by Play One, Remake One, Erase One from the video game podcast Remember the Game. This next segment for us is called Cast, Shift, Erase. Every couple weeks, I'm going to provide you guys, the community, 3 cards in the Discord that you have to choose to cast, play it as it is, shift, change it in any way possible. This could be positive or negative, depending on what you think about the card, or to erase it from the game's existence forever. Um, so in the Discord, some of our first few responses are from Metzbauer. He says that this one was hard for me. I don't think any of the cards are extremely out of bounds. I wanted to erase Rabbit at first, but I think that could hurt purple a ton. He said cast Merlin Crab. I think this card is fair. It gives purple some needed tricks to trade up where the color lacks removal. Shift Merlin Rabbit. The card is amazing value constantly for purple. The fact that it gets a card no matter how it leaves play and where, I think the card could be shifted. If the card read, when you play this character and when he is banished, you may draw a card, would help balance this card just a bit. You could still bounce in with the snakes and foxes and get value from him, but it would tone down the immense card advantage that this card provides. And then he said, erase Madam Mim Fox. This is a huge body with rush for 3 and inkable. The downside of having to bounce a character is almost always a plus to the colors. The fact that it is a pretty cheap way to bounce your rabbits and goats and also be able to challenge right away is a ton of value for a 3 cost. I agree with a lot of what Met said. I think that Crab is probably the most fair out of those, so he could cast it as it is. I do think it's very interesting to kind of shift the Merlin into only getting it when it comes into play and then banish. So instead of getting, the bounce, draw, bounce, play, draw, you kind of get one draw for that bounce and play. That could slow it down a little bit. And then Fox has been crazy since release. We've talked about that card a lot. No, most other cards in the game other than like Maui that have rush are uninkable. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the best takes. I think Merlin is, I think just like you said, Crab is pretty fair. I think Fox, I think I would just alter my erase and shift for him, but we can talk about that after. I think the Mim Fox would probably be like my shift one here. But
Yeah, I agree with everything Matt said. Is pretty fair and on point with the package. I think Crab is clearly the most fair card, and then people have problems with Fox. I think Rabbit is like fine as is.
All right. So this one comes from Ketcherkle. His cast was also Merlin Crab. It said it was the only three of the fair that feels costed correctly and who has an ability that is needed in the color he represents without being abusable. His shift was Madam and Fox. This card should be 110% uninkable. Almost every card that has rush in the game is either uninkable or has lower stats, Maui being the large exception. If you made this uninkable, it would be make it more for a challenging line of deck building, as red and purple already has a very high uninkable count. And having to decide between this and other key cards would allow for a bit more deviation in deck building and not have an automatic 14 to 20 cards for the bounce package. And then erase, he chose to erase Merlin Rabbit, having insanely effective card draw in a color that is already known for its card draw just feels bad. If this card didn't exist, it would make Amethyst players actually have to think about how they would go about getting card draw and not just dropping 2 rabbits with a be prepared the next turn to refill their hand. That doesn't even mention the ability to bounce this for even more card advantage. I find that very interesting because he is right in terms of where he says shifts with the Madam Fox. Like when you're building a purple deck, around 14 to 20 of the cards are the same every time, right? At least currently, because the Madam Mim and Merlin package is just so powerful and works so well. And then I think that his erase without having rabbits kind of interesting because then we'd probably have to go back to playing like a bunch of Maleficents and such, and you would probably play it the same way, right? Like you play rabbit and bounce Maleficent, or play like snakes and foxes to like bounce Maleficent and like play it again. It would be almost the same, but you would draw half the cards, and it can't sing nearly as much of like the 4 cost stuff. So it would damage the color a bit.
I think it kind of, I think it's funny that you say that because that's kind of what I envisioned would happen. It's just with this change is you would just go back to playing Maleficent, and then I was kind of like, well, if they go back to playing Maleficent, that's pretty much what Met said, because and now you don't get the card when it comes to hand. You just have to keep playing it. It'd be a little bit cheaper, and it's an inkable card. So there's kind of like an equal trade off there. I feel like I think this was probably the one that I liked the most. I think the idea of making Fox an uninkable is really good. My alternative would be making her like a 2/3, just because she has rush, and you already have Snake that comes in for 2. That's a 3/3. I feel like it'd be a little bit balanced too, but I think this is probably like the best take.
Nice.
Yeah, I agree with what everyone said. Obviously, there's not a lot of inkable rush cards, which makes Fox crazy. And then I would agree about if we didn't have Rabbit and you just played Llamas and Maleficents and stuff, why you would be pretty fine. Like especially taking it back the last couple meadows, or if like we just had Dolores in set 2 and set 3 and not Rabbit, I feel like Purple Red is still as dominant as it is.
Yeah, playing Maleficent and then just waiting till next turn to sing Friends is always
Yeah,
still
as
good.
long as they have friends, like
Yeah.
friends is the real drawer.
Right. All right, and then the last one that we're gonna read for this segment before we each offer our thoughts is gonna be come from Duck Beanie Senpai. It says there are so many good points mentioned above from players who play this game much more than myself currently. But looking at this from a general card player's perspective, I would say cast Madam M Fox. This the value this card gets from being able to answer threats immediately and being in an archetype that allows you to reuse it by bouncing it back is incredible. It's also reasonably answerable and crumbles to most forms of removal. This card makes the mid game for any color combo with purple in it favorable. Shift, Merlin Rabbit. This card is bananas for being in an archetype focused around recycling and reusing cards. I would change it to only an on play ability, very similar to Mets. This would force more efficient ink usage, and when wanting to amass card advantage and take out of the mindset of, oh, I can just leave Rabbit here. If anything bad happens to it, I still get to draw. Probably my favorite card in the game as it is currently, though. Then he added an edit and said this card could also be fantastic if given to a color that needs card draw, like if this were a steel card, and said anytime this card takes damage, draw a card. If one like that already exists, my apologies. Erase, he said here his erase is crab. He said this card is wonderful, and its reasoning is purely because I highly favor card draw and value effects in the games. Sue me for wanting to stay in Value Town. So Davies' choices here come more from like liking powerful cards more so than balance sake. So if we're looking at it purely from that perspective, yeah, like Fox is insanely powerful. It's a 4/3. It's pretty overstated. Um, it seems that everyone kind of has the same sentiment where a rabbit could have like only an on playability and still be just as powerful in the game. And then him erasing Crab is just funny because he's like, yeah, Crab's kind of mid.
I didn't even think about the shift moving a card to a different color, because
Mhm.
like if Rabbit was not a purple card that could get bounced like repeatedly with like the mims, it would probably be way lower on our totem pole than it currently is. So I can think that's actually a cool idea.
Yeah, I definitely like changing Rabbit's color to any of the other colors struggling for draw, then he wouldn't be as dominant and seem more fair for sure. And I definitely like just doing the cast shift erase and making the cards better for you.
Yeah. No, I like the concept of the game because it lets you like if you like certain cards, you can balance them, you can break them, you can change them, you can make them unplayable. Um, so for me, if I cast shift erase, my cast would probably be crab. A bunch of people have said like crab is the most balanced out of the three, in my opinion. It like has a lot of value in the game, but doesn't do anything too crazy, like too early or too late. Like early on, it's kind of a vanilla, it can boost things to kill other things. Later on, it helps you deal with some bigger threats. It being a 3 cost is huge because Singing Friends is insane. um, my shift, I think I would have to. It's really hard between Fox and Rabbit for me, because either way, um, I think my shift would have to tone each of them down just a tad. Um, I think there are plenty of other Rush characters in the game, honestly, and most of them are uninkable. So if I made Fox just uninkable or like poorly statted, like another Rush character might just take its place, maybe. So maybe let's go ahead and erase Fox, and then I would have to shift Rabbit. I think shifting it to being in another color would be cool because it would kind of, if you wanted to play Rabbit, you it would force you into kind of like playing those two colors specifically. If you wanted to play with the min packages, right? Like say we did put it in red for some reason, you would have to play red purple if you wanted to play Rabbit with the min bounces, right? So like it would kind of force you into those colors if you wanted to get that extra draw power in it. Other than that, the only way I would really change it was I think it'd be fine for a rabbit to be like a 2/2 instead of a 2/3. What I really hate about Fox and Rabbit is that they get to do things like quest and attack and then live. And I think that's really powerful. Like when Fox dies, it's fine. Like when Fox trades, it's essentially just a removal card. But when Fox stays on the board and does something the next turn, that's when I'm like, man, this card is insane. But yeah, so I would cast
Inference.
Crab, shift Rabbit, and erase Fox.
I would probably have a similar cast. I think Merlin is probably, of the cards that we have choices from, I think it's the most fair card. I think it being able to pair with Fox is probably like the most broken thing, because it just like, if you have Crab, you bounce it with Fox, give the Fox +3, you're killing Castle, almost killing Manor. Like it just has like a ton of utility. Or if you have enough to play it, give something +3 and then bounce it, give it another +3 is just like super high value. But without the bounce engine itself, it's kind of mid. So I think it's already kind of balanced, and I think it's fair. Uh, I think Fox. I think even if you made Fox uninkable, it would still see just as much play, because you could just bounce your inkable card with Fox, and you're not like losing anything. I think just changing the stats to make it like a 2, like a 4-2 even would be pretty good. Or like a maybe a 2-3 or 2-4 just to balance it out a little bit. I do think most people are fine with trading it in because we have cards like Rocket Stitch that's like a 3-drop uninkable 3/1 that doesn't see that much play. So I don't want to like nerf it into the ground and make it basically Rocket Stitch, but I also think it would be really good in like a I was gonna say like a different color, but I can't think of like offhand which one I would pick. I think Rabbit would probably be my erase. Uh, just sheer advantage. The card, like your opponent like top decks Bunny, and you remove it, and then they still play another Bunny, or just like Bunny, Snake Bunny, play Bunny. Like they're drawing 3 cards, and I think a lot of the time, and even in set 2 when the cards came out, it really came down. Was it set 2 or set 3?
Too.
It was 2, yes. Even set 2 when the cards came out. Uh a lot of the mirror match, because I was playing red purple in set 2, a lot of the mirror match came down to who saw the draw cards earlier. Less than it was about playing the game correctly. It was just about a resource battle.
As a Amethyst loyalist, I'm going to take Dave's approach here, and I would cast the Fox. I think it's fine as is. Like Corey was saying, if you were to start power creeping it, it just becomes Rafiki, like a 3-drop, 3/3 uninkable quickly that doesn't see play anymore because of Fox, obviously. I would shift Rabbit and make him a 3/5 inkable card because he deserves that. And then I would get rid of the crab. We don't need him. My castle's bigger than yours.
If Merlin was a 3, if Rabbit was a 3/5, the card would be insane.
I had to. 4/7 was too crazy, so we went 5.
I just want to be able
Still
to
dies to
baboom the
Medusa.
rabbit. I just want to be able to baboom that thing out of
Uh,
existence, and this man wants it to be as big as Castle. So the
Yeah.
segment that we are going to be jumping into is called the Magic Mirror Q&A, where you're going to be able to ask us anything you want about Lorcana, us, or even things that are not TCG related, and have it read out here on the podcast. This week, Metz offered his thoughts in a question where he said, "What are some mechanics from other games, Magic the Gathering, Yu-Gi-Oh, Pokemon, that you would like to see brought into Lorcana?" And a couple of people that kind of took over the conversation, and a couple of people offered their thoughts on that subject. So I think that that'll just be the focus for this first one. We'll think about some of these different mechanics. The one that he offered up, he said, for example, I'd like to see something like the coin from Hearthstone. It would be a one-time use extra ink for the person going second. They could play it on turn 1 and play a 2-drop, or save it later to play the card a turn earlier. I think that's pretty interesting, right? Because we're already kind of getting cards that let you catch up, like Hey, that green one that kind of lets you catch up on ink. And then we have cards like, One Jump and like Fishbone that kind of ramp to let you catch up. And with them trying to find all of these alternative ways, like 2-game format to try and balance the going first being so powerful, I think that that could be a potential answer in that, giving that one-time use extra ink deal seems pretty interesting. Especially I like the idea of being able to hold it, so you can like do things a turn earlier. So like, for example, if that existed, right, you would have to think if you're going first. A lot of times we're like, oh, this red deck is getting to turn 5, so I have to think about Maui. Turn 6, think about Tremaine or Medusa. Turn 7, think about Prep. But if this thing existed, you have to think about all of those a turn earlier, just for the potential use, which is really scary.
Yeah, I also think that would be pretty good. Or even if there's just like just more cards, I guess, that were like, hey, obviously, given we're only in set 4, there's still plenty of time for that to happen. I think I think that idea of the coin is I think it would honestly just be really powerful. I'm trying to think of like a situation where I don't want it's like the least broken, because like being able to like just like one turn early like cast swords, or one turn early beat bread, one turn early Medusa, like those are all cards that like are game shifting. Um, I think it would probably have to be like limited like to the first few turns. I don't think you would be able to go much further because blue already ramps to like
Right. Yeah.
infinite level by turn like 5. They're at like 9 or 10 if they have the right hand. So
Yeah, they just play Flavor Sham on 3 with no one jump.
yeah,
Yeah. Definitely.
it's a or fishbone on 2 before you can even sing bare necessity, or something like that. So I think it would just have to like be balanced in like a certain way. But I think the idea of it giving something to that person going second uh is probably something that's getting discussed heavily, I'm assuming, in card design. But I know that that game's already prepared like mad sets ahead of time. So
Yeah, I always love the idea of the coin in Hearthstone, and it works real great in a digital card game where it just appears in your hand. I think that would be a problem in a real physical game. And then, like Corey said, there is stuff that would just make it busted in Lorcana, where it had to be in the initial card design for them to do something like that, and they couldn't just add that. But obviously, going first is quite an advantage, so it would be nice for them to figure out something for second to have.
Absolutely. Um, and then the other mechanic that was offered up to us, which is very interesting, came from DJ Big Russ. It says one of my favorite mechanics from the World of Warcraft TCG was the way that they used quests. They were similar to lands and magic that you played face up in your resource row and then flipped over once you completed the quest, and they would offer, or they could be color specific for Lorcana. The one that he offered up was this quest that said uh after you complete the quest, you get a reward drawing 2 cards. So I think that'd be pretty interesting to have in Lorcana, right? Like it would give a new name kind of to the quest mechanic itself, where we would actually have like mini objectives to do in the game. I think it would add like another layer to that lore and story concept that they're kind of trying to go for. Um, and just having like an alternate objective, like it seems like they're trying to like build a little bit of a world in the game with like adding locations and such. So adding like quests and like things to alternatively do while trying to win the game and kind of like give you card advantage, like this one lets you draw 2 cards, would be pretty cool. You would have to like, it would make you do something that takes away from your objective of getting to 20 lore to kind of take you away from that for a second to give you more card advantage. So I think that'd be pretty interesting. It would kind of slow down your tempo, but potentially up your tempo later in the game, depending on what the reward was.
yeah, I think this would probably be the more fair like of the two mechanics that we've seen this week. Uh, I I think there would still have to be something to just like I don't know. I've never played the WoW TCG, so I don't know if there's a way to like cancel somebody's quest or all like affect their quest. I think anytime you put a card into a game, there has or like a mechanic into a game, you have to kind of like also answer it. I've had experiences in other TCGs where like they'll introduce something and there's no way to stop it from happening, so it's kind of like absurdly broken when it's first announced. So, but I do like the concept of making the game a little bit more about not just questing. You know what I mean? Obviously, there's a give and take with like removal spells and combat and stuff like that. But I do like the concept of this. Uh, I think the biggest thing for me would be having something to answer it. They could call it like an epilogue or something, like the little intro or outro to a book or something along those lines. If that's like their niche that they're wanting to do. I know they said that the name of chapter one, it was just chapter one. It wasn't actually like a something they plan on ever having like a chapter two, quote unquote. But I could see them tying back into it.
Yeah, this was actually one of my favorite things that we got in the Discord this week. I think the idea sounds very Lorcana, like put a card in your inkwell, it's face up, you whatever meet the requirements, and then you get your reward, and then it's like another alternative to questing and like alternative to fighting that Lorcana likes. And then I've never played the WoW games. I don't know how it worked in there, but like Corey said, it having an answer would be something they need to do. I'm sure it would be easy enough, or I think they just make the rewards fairly minimal. And it's like, okay, you put this in your inkwell and it does nothing, but you'll get to draw your card later. And that could be how they add draw power to colors that need it.
Nice, yeah. I think it'd be very interesting. And cool to have a different mechanic like that into the game. Next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about our last couple weeks of tournament experience. Typically, we'll talk about the last weekend of tournament stuff, but this last week for us was pretty dry. We ran a bunch of locals, but didn't have really anything big to kind of talk about. So I'll start. So a couple weeks ago, we went to Ketchum Collectibles for an Enchanted tournament, and for that, I took Emerald Amethyst as green purple. It was a deck that I had been wanting to try that I had thought was like pretty low to the ground, had good removal, was pretty consistent. It did the same thing that it wanted every game, every time, mostly. And then if you were to lose, you would probably lose to the natural mediocrity of the cards versus like bricking or just like having something absurd happen. Like you would just lose to just natural card game stuff more so than like statistical anomalies, I would say. And that's what I kind of really wanted. And it had fairly efficient outs to Diablo while also being able to play Diablo, which I really enjoyed. And so I was able to actually win that tournament. I went 3-1-1 in Swiss. And in Top Cut, we played seeding, so I had to go second every game, every match. That was pretty difficult. And in the top eight, there were four of our Ohana members. So the way that the bracket worked out, we pretty much had to play each other from eight to 4-2, basically. Um, and it was a very difficult tournament, but Emerald Amethyst really worked out well for me. And then in this week, I've been testing the Amber Emerald deck from the Top Chicago. I thought that was very fun, and we'll talk about that a little more in the Chicago segment. And then I've been always looking at Blue Steel because I can't help but not. And then because it's definitely my favorite deck. But I think that for the upcoming event, something different is probably the moves. And then we've been testing a little bit of other decks that I'll let everybody else talk about.
I'll defer to Matt because I didn't go to Ketchum Collectibles because originally the prize structure was just prizing for first, and then they switched it, which I wish I would have known about. But yeah.
I also played at this Catchem tournament. I played Green Steel. I lost the mirror to the same person in Swiss and in top eight, which was tough. I got annihilated by the blue red items deck one time. He had three big Sisus. It was terrible. And since then, I've been kind of leaning off Green Steel and playing Purple Steel and some other stuff. But I definitely think Green Steel is still one of the best decks. And we've just been testing for the 10K in Atlanta or Stone Mountain CCS, and then getting ready for Texas.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like so like Green Steel is obviously like one of the best decks. It's just like I cannot stand getting into these like scenarios that seem like unavoidable where you just get put into top deck battles so often, and I cannot stand like watching my opponent draw 5-drop Robin Hood while I draw a 2-2 Robin Hood, and like their turn is just infinitely better than mine because the next draw off their deck was just better than mine. It's just not a good feeling.
Yeah, I've been playing Green Steel pretty much since we got back from Atlanta. I obviously switched over to the winning list from Chicago to see how I was feeling about that. I think the Flynn was a great addition to the deck. I think it's a super solid card and kind of like lets you close out the game so you're not getting into a top deck battle, which I think helps a lot with like the blue red matchup. Because blue red before you were like so much slower. And then by the time you were getting close to closing out the game, they were ready to start doing their removal shenanigans. But with Flynn, you're able to like quest for a lot more and get to where you need to. You're able to hit 20 before all those things come into play.
Well, that's cool. So since we're kind of like already jumping, let's go ahead and move on to our thoughts on Chicago since we're kind of talking about how it's kind of impacted our decks since then. You kind of started off with the Emerald Seal, the guy that was one, it was a Brian the Rat Cortade.
Yeah.
Other than the Flynn, was there anything about his deck list that you thought was like really interesting?
Um, I didn't. I thought it was really interesting that he wasn't playing at least one grab your swords. Just into I was obviously expecting blue red to be the most represented deck. Just because I think it's the best deck of this format. But I expected green still to be close second, so I figured that would have probably made the list. But I mean, I understand why it's not in there. I've been playing the deck and I haven't missed it once, so um, I thought that was an interesting decision. And then get the Flynn itself, like I said, was I don't think that was on anybody's radar. I think me and Matt were talking about how we both didn't feel like Pegasus was worth anything. Other than like that one turn where everything was evasive, it kind of just felt really mid. We're gonna just look at it, the list, and see what we wanted to like switch it out for. And I think he just Brian was just a step ahead of us in getting to the Flynn decision in testing. I think the only thing I personally want to change is the two one drop Flynns. I feel like they're just completely useless, and they hardly ever come up for me. So that's something that I'm going to be testing this week leading up to the CCS tournament in Atlanta.
Cool. You have any thoughts on the Emerald Steel winning deck, Matt?
I agree. I don't like the one drop Flynn, and the four drop gives you the ability to progress the game instead of it being so slow and help you close out that green steel needs because you always end up in those top deck mirror matches. And for the green purple one, I would think he would have definitely played the Peter Pan Shadow Finder,
Yeah,
and I feel like even he would probably say that now.
right. I'm a really big fan of the Peter Pan card, allowing you to kind of exert your Diablo the turn he comes out, which is something that Green really didn't have unless it was opening. Well, most of them aren't even playing one drop Diablo because they don't play enough actions or songs to really warrant the discard. So having a way to kind of turn them sideways from the jump is really powerful. Swinging into like little Ursulas or Hierams or things that just won't kill them, little Sisus. Um, what about, let's see, we have one of the decks that kind of showed up out of Chicago were the item toolbox decks. Like, right, we've seen Sisu on Ice kind of being like this control ram deck that features, ice blocks and such. But now we're seeing like the new three drop queen that everyone seemed to overlook from the beginning of the set that kind of plays items for free. And we're seeing like Great Stone Dragon, we're seeing Medallion Weights, we're seeing the Dragon's Archer, like all these cards that people kind of probably overlooked from the jump, but they're all making a show up now. And we definitely seen the influence since Chicago and a lot of people's decks. People are trying out all these different items. What do you guys think about those?
I think it's probably the better way to play the deck. I think the only downside to it, and this is just probably my like anecdotal opinion because I haven't gotten to play the matchup myself, but I feel like it makes you a little bit more susceptible to like getting one turned by blue steel. Because if they can just like have double dime and you're not playing any item removal, uh, that's like they just slap Tamatoa with like four popsicles, four Fortis spheres, and they're chilling. Um, So I think that's kind of like the only major downside to it. But I think cards like also seen a lot of Maurice's Workshop making its way into list,
Mm-hmm.
giving you the extra draw power to help combat green still. Um, I think the only downside to it is that you're teetering on more uninkables, which if you don't see Quill, it's already a problem with the deck. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. The blue item toolbox has come a lot bigger, a lot deeper. The list is very tight. They have a lot of uninkables, so which ones you plan to play is how you're going to decide to do it. And then if you think the queen is worth it, and then I think it's awesome they get to take advantage of like Maui's fish hook and the shield and red also.
One of the things I wanted to talk about next was the Sapphire Steel list that made top 8 at the Chicago Challenge. A lot of the notable things here are I've had a really big love hate relationship with One Jump Ahead since it's come out in set one. I've put it in my deck and taken it out like 1,000 times. I feel in this meta, it is a 100% include. Letting you play Hiram on 3 against Discard and Bucky is just incredible. It's very important to keep your hand full against that deck. It's incredibly punishing sometimes to play Quill and then try and dump your hand into that. Especially if you opt to not play a whole new world. This list was, but a lot of people aren't. Um, I really like the inclusion of both Baboom and Magic Broom, giving you multiple options to out Diablo. Magic Broom is a body that gets to live and potentially sing one jump later, which is really cool. I absolutely hate Scuttle. I think that he could probably get by without playing Scuttle, considering he's got the 4/1 jumps, the 2 brooms, the 3 babooms. That's a lot of stuff in your 2-drop slot. And Scuttle's honestly just a bum. I really like the inclusion of Smash. Honestly, I really want to try Smash again. Break Beast is really good for the Ruby Sapphire matchup. It survives Medusa unless they have Ice Block, which is incredible. He's playing the 2 aerial, which some people were playing blue steel were cutting, and I saw the reason why, but I do think it's too good not to include for the matchups to just like cannot out it unless it gets exerted. And so if it's on the field for a turn and you play dime on the following turn, like that's 10 unanswered lore that they like couldn't do anything about. Um, and other than that's pretty much all my thoughts. He plays one Rise of the Titans, which I'm a really big fan of. A lot of people have played Benja, and I've been on Rise of the Titans since locations came out because just having the ability to deal with an item or a location is really huge. And Steel has always had problems like efficiently outing castles without sacrificing a ton of tempo. What do you guys think?
uh, I think I agree with most of those statements, other than Scuttle. I think Scuttle's good. Being able to find Fishbone Quill if you don't open it or get it in your mulligan is just like, I feel like pretty necessary. It also can sing one jump if you needed to on turn 3. Um, I honestly, I feel like the deck should be playing more aerial. I think that aerial is super good, especially because like early, if you see like a lot of Tamatoas early, you usually have to ink them, and it just gives you basically another Tamatoa. Um, but I haven't put any time in on the deck, so I can't say anything. But I know last set I was playing Amber Steel and playing this against this one time with 2 Cogsworth and an aerial, and I couldn't deal with anything. I was just like, yep, time to put up Amber Steel this set. So
Um, I like the list with Wheel. I feel like it's the only deck that can take advantage of Wheel at the moment, except for Ember Steel, of course. And then I also agree I don't like Scuttle. I feel like one jump is very necessary. Uh, yeah, I wasn't going to say anything nice about blue cards.
To say about this blue steel list that I had like just noticed while scrolling through it is it opted not to play Bell whatsoever, which I find interesting. I guess that they thought that the Tamatoas and the aerials were like good enough on like the big lore guys. The only thing that I would really consider with that is with there being so many games where you have like little Aladdins popping your items, um you have like Benja's popping your items if Ruby Sapphire is on um
Judy.
Judy, if she's on Judy, they're popping your dimes. Like there, and then your own Hiram is cracking your popsicles and such. I think that a lot of times you get put in a situation where your Tamatoa isn't being dimed for a ton. And then sometimes you're even in a situation where Ariel, or especially against Ruby Sapphire, if they're getting in those scenarios where you're having to dig for stuff and like they're able to establish items more than you are, like that Ariel's not going to quest for five. So like just having um like the low cost bomb that can come down, even if it's gonna die, like that turn it's gonna gain you five lore most likely, and that can just close the game so much quicker. So I've been a really big fan of Belle, even in this set, even if she is gonna die, the fact that you can play her, gain five lore, and just be done with it. And like just get that much closer to the game being over, I think is huge. And that Dominic Couch tops, he got top eight. That's a big Yu-Gi-Oh player. Um, Tommy got top 32, the guy who was on the very first interview and a video on the channel. He also made top 32. Shout out to him playing Ruby Sapphire again.
I liked his list. It's more cookie cutter with Judy being like the only real spicy card.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Judy in that deck. I think it's like pretty necessary, honestly. And then the it's Bivens, local legend, local hero, whatever you want to call them, also made top 32. He made top cut of the first challenge in Atlanta as well. And in this one, he was one of the few people to make top cut while using Amber Steel in this set. And unlike some of the other colors, Amber Steel didn't get too many cards. Like the lists aren't too different from what we were looking at last set. So, what do you guys think about taking Amber Steel to a challenge like this? And was it a good deck choice? I mean, obviously it worked out for him, but would you guys consider taking this to an event like this?
I played Amber still all of last set for the most part. It feels really bad into this format, especially red purple, or not red purple, red blue. Because Medusa is a problem, and then all of your cards that you need to establish also just get annihilated by a single Sisu. Um, so I don't feel like it's very viable in this format. I think it has an amazing matchup with uh, green steel just because you play wheel, so you can counteract all of their discard and you have all the removal spells at your disposal. So I think it's got a really good matchup in that, but I think everything else in the format kind of struggles a lot against. I respect Bivens for his list, but playing Pride Lands and Flutes just seems like the deck that already has a lot of uninkables, so you have to get like pretty lucky to like not constantly break on uninkables as well. And then I think just in terms of like the support that it got this set, we got a lot of bigger singers. And then I think like the Ursula package, the 2-drop Ursula is probably the best card for the deck. Being able to have that singer 4 is just nice. And that 1/4 body, because I think we had Miss Bianca before that, or Miss Bianca or a mini or something that was a singer 4 2-drop before, but it was like a 2/2. So it got killed really easily versus the 1/4. Um, I tried it a lot. I just didn't think it was able to hold its own against a lot of the decks in the format.
I think it still has like one of the highest ceilings, obviously. If you open like perfectly, get to wheel on turn 2, that's gonna really hurt blue, red, or green steel because they want to sculpt their hand. And it obviously has one of the lowest floors because you can just brick and don't really get to play. And then I agree the Ursula Vanessa card is a great addition. I did like the idea of playing less 1-drop cities and playing more of the Ursula I wouldn't play Flute and Pride Lands. Definitely a deck that needs a skillful pilot that knows all the matchups and all the possibilities. So it's not something new people can just pick up and pilot to success.
Right. I definitely think the amount of time that he put into the game probably helps a lot when piloting a deck like this. But me personally, I kind of agree with a lot of what you guys said. I probably wouldn't. Me personally couldn't take this deck into this format. Where like blue steel, like if the one really good thing about this deck is that it draws wheel to undo its stuff against discard, like blue steel does that just as good, right? But also has ramp.
Mhm.
I'm
And
playing
then
Amber
like
Steel over Blue Steel every day of the week.
I know that you are, but I'm not.
The three world's greatest criminal minds, great addition for Zach to
I
deal
agree.
with
I think that
big
card's
blue
very
red
good this
stuff.
format.
Yeah, killing Sisu, killing or banishing Sisu, banishing Maui, banishing Tamatoa, all good
Yeah,
cards
crab is so
that you just
hard
out with
to
it.
deal with if you're not playing red. And then it has a nice little 3-cost answer or sing it.
Mm,
Yeah, the only thing that I would like say is like this deck feels like even with the cards that it gets and its innovations, like it feels very similar. Like it has been very similar to the same thing that it's been in set one, where if you go first and you open curve and you open well and your hand is not, you are not losing. You're not
mm,
gonna lose. But the moment that you brick, it's all over. And I'm very skeptical in a two-game format with a deck like this, to that you are not gonna 2-0 enough people. But again, Zach, who has like as much time as he does into this game, and probably very similar to that guy who had that like 20 something uninkable Amber Steel deck that had all the mulligans. So he's probably like very similar in that scenario where he knows what he's mulliganing down to the card into the matchup. So
mm.
um this deck probably rewards a very highly skilled pilot, like you said, Matt. So the next thing we're going to talk about is how we kind of think the meta is going to shift based on Chicago. We've talked about it a little bit with what we've been testing in preparation for the 10K this weekend. Hopefully, we'll see a bunch of you guys there. Please come up and talk to us if you see us. Um, Matt and I have been testing a few different decks. One of the ones we mentioned was the Amber Emerald deck that topped Chicago. I think that deck is really good. Its toughest matchup is probably Emerald Steel. Like most decks, it does really well into Ruby Sapphire because it's able to like discard their hand down, and as long as you can like continuously remove the Hiram or like keep them low on like those resources and top decking and trying to have to like top deck into their outs, that deck can do really well in that while also keeping their hand extremely full with like Diablos and Prince John, which is really good. And then it gets to play the Muses, which is very strong into Emerald Steel. Anytime you play like a song, you just get to bounce their thing, which is very powerful, especially if you can like shrink a Robin Hood or a Beast with painting the roses red, and then you just put that back in their hand. And the same thing that Emerald Steel kind of dealt with the last set that it doesn't like this set is like when they deal with removal, paying 5 for a creature in that deck is a lot. And for it to just get zapped immediately is a huge feels bad. Because you feel like you just kind of wasted a whole turn. Luckily, now that you have Diablo, you can kind of get a turn skip like that and be okay with it. Last set, it was like very spooky. Do you guys, you've seen me test it at locals this week. Do you guys have any thoughts on the Amber Emerald deck?
I don't have any personal opinions on it. I think the only thing I would try is probably including the four drop uninkable Ursula that lets you like rip your opponent's cards when you quest.
I like that card a lot.
Just because I think that is another good one for the deck.
What is that card shift cost?
Discard a song.
Song?
Yeah. Um, and then Under the Sea is just a crazy card.
Yeah.
we've played the green steel versus green yellow, and if you get that off, it's pretty bad news for the the deck, especially if I haven't been able to establish any significant amount of draw power with Diablo. So I think that's a really good card that's kind of underrated right now, but there's only like a couple decks that can play it. So
I think the green yellow is really fun, and the C is obviously awesome. I tried it in green steel a little bit and liked it in there too, but I feel like the deck as a whole would just be kind of bricky. And if you don't open what you need, like you're kind of starved for draw cards with only Diablo and
Right.
PJ being your only answers. But when it works, it's awesome, and it can have a good matchup into blue, red, and green steel, which is nice.
Yeah, my only issues so far with the deck have been like you have to get the like you have a lot of pieces that work well together, but then you also have like cards that don't really do anything or really synergize particularly well with the other cards in the deck. So unless you're able to get like a Prince John established and draw your discard cards, you're kind of not drawing anything in the deck unless your Diablo survives. And with everybody hating on Diablo so much, it's unlikely that he's going to stay on the board for very long. And if he goes unchecked, you were winning anyway, no matter what deck you were playing. If he wasn't dying, um, so like just needing all those pieces is kind of what scares me away from that potentially for the 10K this weekend. Other decks that I've been considering that we've talked about a little bit are like purple steel and purple green, both very similar in nature, I think. What they might do for this weekend could be slightly different based on the steel and green side, like what they kind of do for or against the other decks. Um, I think Matt and I have talked about this a lot the last couple of weeks. I think staying low to the ground and trying to undercut red blue is going to be really powerful while trying to maintain like a sensible matchup into green steel is going to like be if you're not playing exactly one of those two decks, like that strategy is probably how you're going to have the most success.
yeah, I agree with that. I think going into Chicago, I expected blue red to be the most represented deck for the 10K in Stone Mountain. I definitely think that it'll be green steel as like the heaviest represented deck. So as long as your deck has enough outs to that and can fare well into the rest of the meta, I'm sure there's going to be plenty of red purple just because there's loyalist and then blue red as well. Yeah, I think purple steel is good, get into it as long as you can see the pieces you need. Um, I think there's some rogue picks that you could probably make. Like you could probably show up with Amber still, and if you see the matchups you want to see, which is like Emerald still, um, given that it's best of three, you probably have a better chance to win the matchup. If it was a best of two format, I think your deck choices are much slimmer.
Yeah, I've really been thinking about what deck I'm going to play based on best of two or best of three, since it's like different every big event, or I guess the Disney ones are two and the other ones are supposed to be three. And then I've definitely been enjoying Purple Steel. I feel like it has the answers to everything. You have to play like a deep toolbox of stuff. Obviously, you have to see it, but I think green, steel, and blue, red are probably the better options and one of the decks that will win in the 10K.
Definitely, I agree with a lot of that. Other than that, the only other thing that we have to talk about today is the Lorcast, which I think that a lot of us were hoping that we would get a little bit more from the Lorecast, but what information we did get was that the next set 5, is going to be called Shimmering Skies. The very first thing I said when I heard that name was, "This sounds like a Pokemon set." But what's really cool is that essentially the PVE set from this past set, or the one that we're in right now, the Ursula set is supposed to be after she's been defeated. All the characters are kind of getting together to have a party afterwards, which creates the shimmering skies with the fireworks and such. And things we got revealed were like the racers from Wreck-It Ralph for the red cards, which seemed really cool. We got a few characters that we've seen before, but in different colors. Um, Finally, Wreck-It Ralph is coming to the face of a structure deck and a set, it seems, and then we're getting "You're Welcome" as a green 4-cost inkable song, which is absolutely crazy. So out of what we got from the Lorecast, what were some of the things that were notable to you guys? For me, the number one thing was "You're Welcome."
Yeah, I think You're Welcome was definitely probably the best card they showed. Uh, I'm super excited though for Wreck-It Ralph. It's one of my favorite movies, so uh, I'm anxious to get my hands on some of those cards and see what else they put in the set for it. I kind of hate that the racers are all red, but that makes sense because they're all like cheap rush characters or like cheap lore removal. Uh, I think the big bad is going to go to Hades, just based off like the little trailer that they showed with Hercules and Hades kind of arm wrestling. So I'm pretty excited about that. I like the Kristoff card that they showed, the 3/7, or I think it was 3/7. It's like Song
It's a
Chernabog,
large.
but he doesn't shuffle him back. The only downside of that card is it dies to Medusa, but I'm excited for the set. I think the lore cast as a whole was kind of subpar. I think it was mid. Um, I like the giant cards that they used to demonstrate instead of like having the camera zoom in on the physical card. I thought that was kind of nifty. A lot of people want those giant cards as like prize wall support. I think that would also be a good addition. We're familiar with those from Yu-Gi-Oh, so I think that would be kind of cool. Um, but I'm anxious to see what kind of reveals we start to get out of there. I'm expecting something that's gonna help decks beat discard, and we saw that with a lot of the the Elsa that had rush and evasive. I think there was a red racer that was rush evasive, um, that were all big enough to kill Diablo and not die themselves. So I think Green Steel will kind of have a little bit of a falling off coming this next set.
From the Wreck-It Ralph cards, I definitely like to see more lore removal. I think like a lore, make your opponent lose lore deck would be real cool in red and green. And then the thing we didn't talk about, I feel like we need to, is the legendary Merlin that will let you search for any card and add it. I don't see it as being that great at the current moment, but obviously as time goes, that card will be crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You're kind of forced to play blue purple if you wanted to play it, so that'd be kind of tough. But I'm sure somebody will figure out a way to crack it.
Yeah, I mean, we could also just get a cheaper blue Merlin in the next set
This is
too.
very true too.
So
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think that Merlin has the potential to be crazy. Right now, with the lack of reveal, like it's very early on, we don't know a lot of what the set's going to be. But right now, I think the safest color that they could have put that in was probably blue, right? Like, not to hate on blue or anything, but like if we would have saw
Missing a
that,
blue card.
if we would have saw that in like some other colors, I might have been a little more worried. The only thing that I don't want people to do is like search dime, which is kind of a scary thought, but you know, that's a lot of mana for one turn. So, yeah, I think that being our very first card that tutors something from the deck reveal to this set, um, is crazy and kind of foreshadows where things are going to eventually go. I didn't know when we would finally get a card that tutored something from the deck, but it being set 5 seems relatively appropriate. Like I did really enjoy us having to like dig for outs as opposed to being able to search them coming from Yu-Gi-Oh, where it always feels like you kind of can get to your answer.
mhm.
Um, but I think it'll be interesting, and I think that they have the potential to do it in a way that doesn't seem insane or too fast. If they planned it as well as I hope they did.
Yeah, I think technically the second tutor because there was the Madrigal tutor.
Oh, I don't
But
even know what that card does.
it searches your deck for a Madrigal character and puts it in your hand. So,
Whatever.
but like I said, this is definitely the first playable one. So, we'll see. I think, like I said, it's like you said, it's super early in the set, so we don't really know. Imagining Blurple right now, uh, there it's already like a super high cost deck. So playing like a Shift Merlin in there would probably be along their alley, but I don't think it makes the deck very playable because it seems kind of rough right now.
Right. Like that card has like because it searches anything from the deck, it has almost limitless potential, right? Like the only
Mm-hmm.
limit to itself is the Merlins that we can put it on, how much it costs, and the fact that it's blue.
Yeah.
Yeah, just hope they don't make other good blue cards.
Yeah, the day that blue is like the best deck, Matt like falls over.
Yeah, we play something.
But other than that, I think that that's where we're about going to end here. Please, please, please check out every single one of our socials in the description. Follow each and every one of them. Absolutely, please join our Discord if you want your comments to be read in the segments on the next podcast. I think they're very fun. I'd like you to participate in those. Hopefully, in Atlanta this weekend, I'll be able to do some of the play shift or cast shift erase in person with some people, so that'll be fun. But yeah, please join all those things. Follow us, keep in contact with us. We would love to talk to you. And we're really excited to build this community. Do you have any last comments, guys?
Nothing for me. Hopefully I'll be walking away with that money in Atlanta, but that's all I got. I need to up my foil collection.
I also think it's real dope that they're putting Lorcana cards in the villainous game and putting promos in other ways. I think it's a good way to grow the game to get it into the movies and the parks and stuff.
Absolutely. Hopefully, we see some, like you mentioned before, like movie promo or kind of cards,
It's
and
gotta be Moana too.
yeah, like more like giving eggs and bacon as a promo for the Moana 2 movie would be sick. Little hollow Pua and Hey Hey card.